do you sell 10K a week in insurance? Well, this week I did exactly that. And I did that in honestly working a lot less than a week. Maybe worked actually really dialed like 3, 4 days. And most of those sales actually came on one single day. Like one day was almost 5K in sales, it was 4,900, right? So that's just because I run other parts of the business. I'm not only here to sell. And I didn't come into insurance transparently as someone who was, brand new to business. Like I ran other businesses before, but I really realized, as you can probably see by my first video on this channel about insurance, is that like, look, you're gonna have to go into the trenches. You're gonna have to really sell, and because you're gonna have to lead the team by example. It's just not gonna serve you if you're trying to take that shortcut and trying to just put managers in right away with having no idea how to sell. You got to go through every part of the business if you want to do it to the highest degree. Okay. Now it might sound logical, but if you're coming from business before, then you realize that, those kinds of low leverage activities don't make sense for you, especially if you got money in the bank, where I've already made a couple million in my career, right? But I do really see the potential in insurance, and I love the business as well. But, those activities aren't leveraged in terms of money now, but they're leveraged in terms of long-term leadership for your team. Anyway, so basically getting into the sales part of it, how to sell that 10K a week. There's essentially 3 components to making it work. Number 1 is lead flow. Number 2 is workflow. And number 3 is skill, right? So if you have those 3 elements, you're gonna have cash flow, right? And so you're gonna have to start with lead flow, right? Meaning you got to have and get enough leads, right? Now, people always talk about, okay, bad leads, bait and switch leads, very cheap leads, 50 cents, a dollar, whatever. And that's kind of what we start people out on in my agency. And we might help them, ramp up with some leads. We might give them some if they're obviously actually committed and showing up. But that being said, that is a kind of the widest profit margin type of lead, because it's the safest lead to go on because it's so cheap, right? So you're gonna have more batting shots, and essentially there's more sweat equity in those kinds of leads. So you're gonna have to work a lot more. If you take those leads and you work them a ton, then you're gonna have bigger profit margins on those leads, right? And then from there on, you can graduate into, higher intent leads, fresh leads, okay, that are gonna allow you to really buy your time back and call someone up and have them actually be interested in actually looking for insurance and actually filled out a whole form and actually looking for it right now, right? Now, those are still not going to be laydowns, honestly, right? Which might be surprising to you, but those are still not going to be laydowns. You're still going to have to actually make people make a decision, right? You're still going to actually have to build trust, rapport, find the right option for people. You're still going to get a bunch of people who have bad expectations, right? They might expect like, oh, I'm just going to get insurance like a 100,000. I'm 72 and I want 100,000 for $50 a month. You're just going to get a lot of fucking stupid people, to be honest, as well. All right, so you're still going to have to deal with that, and you've got to be aware of that. But that being said, that is like a much more easy and much more nice way, I would say, of running insurance. If you obviously have gone through a first stage. Now, as to actually selling at a high level, it's going to be of that lead flow first, right? You want to get enough leads. Okay, now what is enough leads? I'm just saying, like, some people say like, oh, you got to write 10K in your first month, or you got to write 20K. It really depends how much you spend on leads, okay? Because if you spend $100 on leads and you write 20K, that's just nearly impossible, right? I never want to say things are impossible, but I'm just saying, like, look, those kinds of things are just very far-fetched. Now, obviously, we're talking about, if you're in my agency and I give you leads, that's a different kind of story. But then we still got to calculate how much lead spend did I put in, right? And then how much should you write off that, right? So if you're coming in, you should be expecting to make, right, deposit, bottom line, 3 to 5 times whatever you put into leads. So if you spend, right, $1,000 in a week on leads, that you should make minimum like kind of 4 or 5K out of that. And then that's what you're obviously, those kinds of what your numbers are looking like. So it depends. It's not as much about how much should you write, it's about how much should you write with the lead spend that you actually had, right? Or the amount of leads that you had. So that's just how you want to think of it. Now, I would recommend starting out, right, to spend a couple $100 in the first week and then turn that into 1K, 1.5K, whatever, right? Really work those leads very hard, because the harder you work leads, obviously, the bigger the profit margin is going to be as well. And then from there, you're going to be able to reinvest your earnings from there. You got to understand this is a business, not a fucking job, right? Reinvest your damn earnings. Don't go out and buy a fucking Louis bag or some bullshit, okay? Reinvest your shit. And then from there, guys, that's the lead flow, right? And then from there on, it's the workflow. So you're going to have to really, really work hard at this if you want to truly make it work. Now, I will say, I don't agree with people that are like, oh, you got to do this 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. Because look, many people I see 12 hours a day are not working 12 hours a day. Like, it's more so about like doing real focused work, okay? Being real focused, being continuously on the dialer, and not on the dialer on TikTok at the same time, blah, 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 right? Being on the dialer whilst it's waiting. You can play music or whatever, which is what I like to do, right? Kind of keep yourself in a good state. But actually on the dialer and actually having conversations. And you also want to really track, right, your numbers. How long have you been dialing? How many people have you dialed, right? And then how many conversations have you had? How many presentations did you get? Those kinds of things, so you can kind of see where you're messing up, right? The tracking is super important as well. And so it's more about that, okay? Like banging out at least 300 dials in a day. And then look, if you can do that super fast, then you can do it super fast, right? It's like more about focused work, because again, many people that sit in the office for 12 hours, 14 hours a day, and I do that myself, but I'm just saying, like, it's more important to actually do focused, high intent work than it is to like stretch out the hours to make yourself feel like you're really working, right? Like, once you actually start writing down how many dials you actually did and how many conversations you actually had, it'll be enlightening for you, because you want to crank that number up as far as possible, right? And then the sales are going to come. But it's not about just sitting in front of your computer working and not truly working, right? Like, I have one guy on my team and he crushes it. He writes like, he wrote like fucking 18K last week, and the week before that was like 15K, so he crushes it. And then I asked him, like, hey, how many hours a day do you actually work? And he was like, oh, like, 10, 12, whatever. And I'm like, okay, how many hours do you actually work, right? Actually really dial, have a conversation or close, whatever. He said 4 to 5, right? I was like, dude, that's crazy actually, right? So this is an example of what I mean. So anyway, that's the workflow, okay? You got to hit those leads. Now, what does that specifically mean for those leads? It means that if you get 100 aged leads, 100 cheap leads, you want to hit them at least 3 times a day, which creates 300 dials, right? Morning, afternoon, evening. Okay, and that's basically how that works. And then you want to double dial every single lead. That's the aged leads game. And then if you get fresh leads, you might get 25. And then you want to do the same thing. Hit them 3 times a day, text them. And look, if you want to go beyond that and you want to have even wider profit margins, but that depends on where you're at in your journey, you want to also FaceTime them. You want to also send them a message. You want to send them a picture, right? If you want to squeeze more out of that lead pack, then you can do that if profitability is the most important thing for you. But if it's not, then obviously you just move on to the next one, because it's not worth your time at that point, okay? It's better to go to new leads at that point, because it's not as much about just squeezing everything out of it, because you already have funds, so you just keep going. It's essentially like a casino, guys, where you put in $1,000 and you get $5,000 out of it, but it's guaranteed to work every time. And what's making it guaranteed to be successful, this casino machine, is your actual work, okay? And so from there, that's how that works. And then the last part is the skill, okay? So you're gonna have to know and understand sales and then underwriting, right? Those are really the 2 main things, like your communication, your sales, and then your underwriting. So let's focus on the main things that actually make it work, okay? The main things are, number 1, being in a good energy and a good state, okay? Doesn't have to mean necessarily that you're all jolly and smiley over the phone, but it just means that generally speaking, you got to be in a good energy, right? You got to feel positive about your day. How you do that is you focus on the positive things in your day. You focus on the activity being the actual win, right? Instead of the result, okay? And then from there on, keep yourself in a good mood. Use your body, right? Walk around a little. Play music whilst you're dialing. Personally, me, if I'm dialing, right, not necessarily fresh leads, but like aged or something, I'll play music, I'll stand there, I'll do my shadow boxing, right, things like that. Or I might joke around with the team. Or if someone is like picking up the phone and cussing me out, call them right back, right? Gary, what's going on, man? Why are you all pissed and shit? Like, here's an example of one of the calls that I had.
What do you call me Ben for? I tell you to go fuck your mother.
I know what she needs. She just
Gary?
Who is this?
Gary's just Boyd.
What do you call me Ben for? I tell you to go fuck your mother.
Gary, I had a... And then from there, you're going to enjoy your day. You're going to actually laugh. You're going to actually, have fun with it. And that's super important because that creates a good state, okay? Like if you've ever gone out to a nightclub and picked up chicks or whatever, then you probably know that like if you're just in a really good emotional state, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter as much like even how you say it. It's just because you're in a very good, fulfilled emotional state. It just all works better. Everything works better. If you're in a good state, good comes to you. And that's a very important thing that most sales reps completely miss. The second part is going to be assuming the sale, right? So assuming the sale throughout, meaning like you are assuming that they want it. You are assuming that they need it, that they want it, and that they want it now, okay? That's very important. Assume throughout the sale that they want this, they need this now, right? Don't be like, oh, maybe this, maybe. You assume that they want it because at the end of the day, they fill out form and life is just something that every person needs. If they already have it, they still need it because if you're a broker like we are at the wolvesofinsurance.com, wolvesofinsurance.com without D, okay? Link in the description if you want to work on my team actually, completely free, okay? Then from there, you're going to have this, and then from there, because you're a broker, right, you're going to have more options to different companies. You can 90% of the time set someone up in a better situation, right? If they already have a policy, maybe there's a 2-year wait and you can eliminate that. Or if they already have a policy, maybe they're overpaying, which is very often the case. A lot of your sales will be like that, okay? So don't give up there. And then assuming the sale as well, right, is also just going to transfer that belief system over into them, right? That it's normal to just do this right now. It's normal to just do this in one phone call. It's normal that they should just want this and need this, etc. Okay? So assuming the sale is very important. And then from there, one of the most important things actually is going to be having higher standards, okay? What I mean by having higher standards is having a team that shows you what's possible, right? Like a huge thing will be if you see your manager, right, or your team or whatever it may be on recorded calls or live in Zoom, close someone that you really would have hung up on, right? You would have been like, this is someone who's not going to buy, and they close it, right? Or this is someone who's like, I'm busy right now. Hey, no, that's not a problem. Just take a minute or two, and then they end up getting into an application, right? Which was one of the things that I showed my guys last week, right? Or someone who has a heavy social objection, right? They don't want to give their social security number. They don't want to give the bank, and then you still get it done. Whatever, right? Or they say, I'm not interested off rip, and then you see someone still close up. Those kinds of experiences show you what's possible and raise your standard, because many reps, they just give up too soon, right? They're just like, if it's not a real lay down sale, then it's not a sale, right? Well, then you're not a fucking salesman, are you? Because a salesman means that you can turn a no into a yes. If it's just a yes into a yes, you're a fucking order taker. Now, transparently, you're always going to have lay downs in insurance sales, and even if you only hit lay downs, you're probably going to already make some decent money, but you're going to want to actually master your craft, right? So raise your standards for who you think can be closed. Because honestly, with insurance, it's almost fucking anybody, okay? And people will have their guard up. People will say they're not interested. Go push through it, all right? Even if it's just for exercise. So that's a huge one. And then obviously, guys, it's just going to be about actual regular sales skills, right? Micro skills like having a solid script, doing a good discovery, right? Putting them in a buying pocket, which is going to mean that you're obviously asking them questions like, hey, why is this coverage important to you, right? What were you looking to cover? Those kinds of things. And then what would happen if you didn't have this policy in place? And then many people are going to say like, oh, that wouldn't happen because I'm not allowing it. Well, look, I apologize. I'm not, don't mean to overstep here, John, but currently there is no policy in place. If you've gotten hit by a bus today, or if we don't put this in place tomorrow, then that's exactly what's going to happen, right? And once again, I don't mean to overstep at all, but at the same time, I do want to make you aware of the fact that currently it's not in place. Now, I'm obviously happy to help you out, but and we're doing it here now. But that being said, like, what would it actually look like for Jake if he was faced with that cost, like today or tomorrow, what would he have to do? And you got to build that pain, because look, sometimes you get lazy with it in the discovery process, like you're not actually building enough pain and putting them in a buying pocket where you covered every single scenario, and they truly admitted that it'd be terrible, that he wouldn't have funds, etc., and that they need to do this now, those kinds of things. Then they're still going to hit you with something later, right? So even one call this week that I messed up on could have been a close, to be honest. It was kind of like on the edge. And I have a follow-up with the guy today, and then I had another close that didn't go fully through, but I have a follow-up again today. But usually you don't want to follow up. But anyway, with this guy, I honestly skipped out the process a little too much, because he was like, yeah, I'm not letting it happen. Don't even need to think about it, because I'm not letting it happen. I kind of accepted it a little too much, to where I didn't ask, hey, how would it actually be for him if it had happened? And then at the end, he wanted to think a little, and I really tried to fucking handle the objection. But in the end, he said like, what it is, I need to just touch base with my son as well, because he needs to, I need to confirm with him that, he didn't already set something up, or he didn't, and it's probably a smoke objection, okay? And transparently, I wasn't able to get through it. I had to schedule follow-up. I do think I did the best that I could in that situation, because pushing harder sometimes will also crack the deal. But anyways, that being said, if I would have asked that before, he couldn't have said that, right? And then I would have had him kind of pinned down. So, that's the thing. You don't want to get lazy with it. You do want to just go through the process, okay? Don't let clients convince you that they're already sold too much, because, then they might switch up on you. So that's another thing, right? The sales process, actually opening good, right? The opener is obviously super important. You want to be in a good energy. There are different styles of sales. Some people want to sound very disinterested. Some people want to sound very smiley and stuff. I'm a little in the middle, depending on the person. And last thing I'll tell you that's super powerful, guys, especially in insurance, is mirroring, okay? Which is like, if you have a veteran on the phone, alpha male veteran kind of dude, and they're very tough kind of speaking, you want to just match that, right? You want to kind of match and mirror them, meet them where they're at, right? If you have a lady on the phone that's very sweet, you want to just be very sweet. You want to, like, guys, you wouldn't recognize me how I sometimes talk to these people. Like, very sweet, very like non-threatening, putting myself as kind of like a beta male, to some extent. Like, it's just what works, right? To mirror people and do what they need, because in this kind of space, there is a lot of trust that's needed, right? And then from there, just going through the process, learning the underwriting, knowing kind of what carrier to go to, right? You're going to have to learn all of that. And that will honestly be kind of a full map for you, right? It's the workflow, lead flow, and then the skill, right? Which consists of being in a good energy, assuming the sale, having high standards in terms of who can be closed, and then having a good general sales process and a script and stuff like that. If you want to have my script, then just shoot me a DM on Instagram. It's going to be @BoydHook. And then if you want to join my team, go to wolvesofinsurance.com. You can book an interview there. There will be a video explaining everything that we offer in my team. Or you can DM on Instagram as well. All right? So hope that helped. See you in the next one. And go sell some fucking deals.